Hello and welcome today to the RECOSMOS studio, in which we have the honor of receiving General Yakovleff for the second time. Hello Gerard, hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the probability of a war between Russia and NATO through invasion, annexation, the attempt to attack the Baltic states. It's a possibility that is feared by the German, Baltic, Polish intelligence services, who clearly say that there is a Russian plan, in which, after obtaining a ceasefire or a victory in Ukraine, they stop fighting. Over 3 years, they amass an army of 800,000 men and thousands of armored vehicles on the Baltic states, invading before we can react. Optimistic, ambitious scenario.
Optimistic, ambitious for the Russians. I don't really believe it. But I understand that we can, and already, I understand that we must prepare for it. Because if we say I don't believe it, well then it's good, so life goes on as before. Indeed, by constantly not believing in it, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's what's
happened to Ukraine, by the way. We didn't believe it, well then as a result, he took advantage, he attacked. Fundamentally, I think we are mistaken in confusing Putin attacking NATO and Putin wanting to attack a NATO member. For him, NATO is a bloc, it's Western solidarity, it's the major obstacle for his dreams of power and domination in Europe. It's the solidarity of NATO and the solidity of NATO. So he attacks NATO, and in the sense of what makes us want to stay together, the United States in NATO or not, or the United States destabilizing NATO today, all of this is not a blessing for Putin, which is not the same thing as attacking Estonia or Poland.
But at that point, the destabilization of NATO, as an entity capable of defending itself to ultimately have bilateral relations with countries that have separate ambitions, wouldn't that be a prerequisite for an attack on the Baltic states?
In Putin's dream, NATO closes down like the Warsaw Pact. In fact, he said it openly. We closed the Warsaw Pact. Why didn't you close NATO? So you're closing NATO. Trump is leaving. NATO headquarters in Brussels is being converted into social housing, allowing everyone to finally go home. And that day he gets the Europe he wants, because he can deal with each country individually. And so he's going to say to Estonia, you still exist, don't you? It's not normal how he did it with Ukraine. But it's more to impose his law than to invade. That being said, I heard an Estonian last year saying that it's something very strong. Either he loses in Ukraine and he will want to take revenge, or he wins in Ukraine. It opens up opportunities and creates desires for him.
And in both?
As an Estonian, I feel bad in both cases. So I understand that the most exposed countries are worried. That I understand. Poland is less and less worried because it has become quite hard to swallow. The Baltic countries are still gradually strengthened. And then they start to create national armed forces that are likely to cause a problem. Despite everything, it's
countries with 1 million inhabitants.
So in total, it's 5 million, it's the same population as Finland. Finland, on the other hand, has 14 brigades that can be mobilized in 24 hours. Finland is not afraid of Russia. It never has. Well, since 1990, it has never feared Russia militarily. She says, you can always come and we'll explain to you. You see the Western Military District of NATO, of Russia that NATO was talking about, until it burned in Ukraine in 2022, the Western Military District. It was 14 brigades, the equivalent of the Finnish army. So the Finns, we're not afraid of them, those guys. So why the Finns with 5 million inhabitants, 5 or 6 million inhabitants manage to have 14 brigades, and the 3 Baltic countries with 5 million inhabitants can't manage to have 14 brigades. So at the very least, they could have 6. 1 plus 2 plus 3. When we see the balance of populations with 6 actual brigades present, more than that. Because the Estonians have that, and the Latvians and Lithuanians are starting to think about it, the day when they really have a conscription army with masses of volunteers behind. And then they do like the Swiss, for example, they distribute hundreds of thousands of war weapons among the population. Well, with NATO, in addition with the defense, NATO's solar defense with artillery, deep strike capabilities of NATO. So all the stuff that costs a lot is covered by NATO. Everything that requires a lot of manpower and knowledge of the terrain and courage and self-sacrifice is taken on by the local population. The NATO deal is that you defend yourself and we assist you. It's different from doing nothing and expecting us to defend you.
Russia wants to separate the United States from NATO, which is why they're interfering in your affairs.
And to burst.
NATO, a European NATO without the United States, could potentially be more united. It would be a return to the
Treaty of London, the Western European Union, which predated NATO by a few months or a year. That worries Putin a lot less, that's for sure. And above all today, there is no strategic alignment between the major powers, Germany, Poland, Great Britain and France. Of these four countries, there is one that has a real army but lacks depth, that's France. There is one that has an army in disarray, that's Great Britain. There is one that has a fictitious army, that's Germany. One country has an army that will be very strong soon, but not yet. In 2 or 3 years, they will be ready. So there, if already the four, we were all in a so-called militaristic dynamic. You see what I mean? Creation of defense. And, for example, we agree on solar means, instead of having 3 models of solar defense. Having 3 different missiles complicates the life of the enemy, even though it may sound stupid.
But nevertheless, the signs that the Russians are sending by regularly violating airspaces, including in 2022, with a nuclear bomb under a Sukhoi 27 in Swedish airspace. It's unclear if it was a real model, but the signal was sent nonetheless. By having drones that fly over Germany, violating space to go fly over power plants, the military and political dimensions are present, with Patrushev allegedly granting the right to annex countries.
Baltic countries afterwards.
The disappearance of Ukraine. To you, this is all just bluffing.
Let's say that the most likely is not military intervention, but that's not the opinion of my Baltic friends. And they, by the way, when I say that, they say, yes, it's normal, you're from France, it's far, you have time to see it coming. And there is a certain logic. I don't forget that shortly before the war of 2022, phase 2 of the Ukrainian war, on television, I had been struck to see Putin and Lukashenko. It was on television like the 8 o'clock news, a thing in passing, or Lukashenko who says to Putin, and you know that my country has no access to the sea. And Putin, nature to say that can be settled. So then afterwards, the Germans do some okay analyses in some leaks, and so they make plans, and they say that the Russians are making plans. Yes, everyone makes plans.
But we don't make invasion plans, yes?
Absolutely. That I can say with certainty to reassure all your listeners that NATO does not make a NAR Moscow plan. You
remind you of your journey at NATO?
Yes, well, finally, so...
No, but you were in a position that, well...
Yes. So I saw the previous plans, not the current ones, but the plans, that's clear. These are defensive plans which in practice would bring the Russians back to the border. No doubt they wouldn't hesitate to strike deep if necessary. To get there, well, but it's not a plan of, and then we're going to conquer Belarus and we're going to conquer St. Petersburg. No, that won't happen for a simple reason. Most NATO countries won't want it. However, a NATO plan is approved by the 32 members. So at the limit, even if there were 2 or 3 who were super excited and wanted to go all the way to Nizhny Novgorod, the guys who signed the plan, it only takes one to say, but there's no way we're going to Nizhny Novgorod, so I'm not signing for that. So I don't know what the plans are, but I know they're not aggressive. On the other hand, NATO is becoming more and more so. There will be big announcements this summer. NATO is getting ready for the long term with a real defense capability, including we are going to return to forward defense instead of the first strike is to the benefit of the Russians. After that, we must reconquer, which is problematic because they threaten to go nuclear if we do. Well, we are in the process of resurrecting forward defense. They start having problems from the first kilometer.
We don't let them take all the Baltic countries before trying to take them back.
No.
And
it's okay.
Them. And that means we would have brigades on site
So we already have forces on site.
We're talking
about reinforcing them.
However, in addition to potential deployments in Ukraine to provide a reassurance force for the country,
to my knowledge, no one is currently saying it, neither in Washington nor at NATO.
Ukraine, we're not talking about it. It's fire in 2 years.
There's Trump who said, and a European force in Ukraine, why not? From my perspective, this would be an excellent idea also for the European Union. If America doesn't want to participate, it means we'll need to
become self-sufficient. He
is going to help us become independent. It's a wonderful idea. But so, to get back to the eventuality, the reality, the probability of a military attack, I'm not talking about hybrid. There we are there, as you said, we are there, but of a conventional military attack with tanks crossing the border, that would be a technical possibility for the Russians, maybe 3 years after the cessation of hostilities in Ukraine. But in the current state of affairs, I don't believe it. Now, I'm not the one Putin listens to.
In 2014, at the very beginning of Russia's war against Ukraine, when they annexed Crimea, you said that if we didn't react, we were witnessing the beginnings of the Third World War. Indeed, up until now, it seems we're heading in a direction where, since we're not reacting, they're going further and further. When you said that in 2014, did it include a Russian aggression on the Baltic states for you?
I didn't believe it any more at the time than I do now, actually. But on the other hand, the passivity of the Western world, because we react, if you want. We wake up, we are sluggish, we are really weak in the knees. So we're improving a bit, but we're not in everyone's wake-up mode, and in everyone's wake-up mode, there is not only the capacity recovery, which implies industrial recovery, including European autonomy, because when the Poles rebuild their army, they buy 80% from outside Europe. So yes, they quickly pay for a well-endowed and consistently equipped army with quality equipment. Korean equipment is serious stuff. They make more than just phones. So all of this is very good. But how could a Europe that would be all alone defend itself during a war against Russia? We're not going to tell the Koreans to send us more tanks. You see what I mean? How long will they take to arrive? Nor to the Americans, for that matter. So we have to recreate the European defense industrial and technological base, but deliberately, and that the European Union. The number of countries that do not understand this issue, it's catastrophic. In addition, we still do not have alignment of nations to equip ourselves with a real European decision-making capacity, considering operations up to the level of war. What if the Americans don't want to come and help us command all this? Because so far they are the ones doing it. So we remain an invitation to aggression for Putin. And that's why we continue to be on a trajectory towards World War III. So
this awareness that all European military personnel have, this awareness the policies and means are not following today. But aren't there urgent matters to address, such as the situation with the Turks? Turkey shot down a Russian Sukhoi Su-24 plane for violating its airspace. There is no longer a violation of their airspace. It's been now 3 years, and even more than a decade, that we see the Russians violating our airspaces without us reacting to intercept missiles entering Polish and Romanian airspace, even before having more resources. Just to react at the threat level, like the Turks did, wouldn't that already be a way to tell them that there are limits? Well, yes, okay, we agree on that. And so we need to evangelize.
Today's French politics, it's whether there will be a government tomorrow, whether there will be a budget, whether our social benefits, etc. That seems completely out of touch to me, because face of our social system, when it's Putin who will make the law in
Europe,
we'll have the social system of the Russians. Is that what you want? So we're not in wake-up mode, and not in the mode since we're waking up. We agree among ourselves once and for all. The Germans, whom I hold in high regard, continue to drag us down. They are sinking us, I say it frankly. The English,
they have a very accounting view of defense, yes, and then
above all, they have lots of problems in their purchasing procedures. It's a disaster. Well, and the The English are doing badly, very badly militarily. And their budget, higher than ours, is not successful because they are not good at managing their budget. All their stuff, their too expensive tricks don't work, etc. And then they lose men, and that's it. And the Poles, that's the good news at the moment, except that it is done in total obstruction
of an industry
European
of defense. So I still have a little anecdote. There are French industrialists and deputies who have been to Poland to tell them, come on, let's do a joint armament program. Like this, we define the need, and then we start the industry. And then in 3 years, we start to produce. And the Poles told them, but in 3 years, if we start to produce, in 3 years, we are invaded before in 3 years. So we can't afford to wait for Europe to move. That's the lack of European decision making. My General, a big thank you. Thank you, Evangelize. Repeat the good word of General Yakovleff. I think we need at the European level. Thank you, my General. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon at the Recosmos studio.